Welcome everyone. We are here today to talk about Metso's journey in productizing generative AI solutions and more specifically focusing on retrieval augmented generation. We're going to be discussing some of the key technical learnings on what needs to be considered when going from POCs to actual in-production solutions. But before we dig deeper into the actual topic, let's quickly introduce ourselves. Starting from you, Hasmit.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Hashmeet, and I'm the lead enterprise architect at Metso. And in my role, I drive Metso's IT architecture principles and guidelines, and I'm also supporting the strategic priorities. And I like to look at the big picture, so focus on the big picture when it comes to enterprise architecture. And our team has also been responsible for setting up the Metso AI task force last year. So that's shortly about me.
Yeah, and my name is Vili Koistinen. I work at Solita as an AI designer, and my role is basically to help our clients like Metso in identifying, designing, and implementing AI solutions, and mainly focusing on actual outcomes, so trying to deliver positive outcomes for the business as well as the end user. But maybe you could introduce Metso in brief, as Metso might not be familiar with all of the audience.
Yeah, I think that'll be nice. So Metso is a front runner in sustainable technologies, and we provide end-to-end solutions and services for aggregates, minerals processing, and metals refining industries globally. We are headquartered here in Espoo, Finland, and we are also listed on Nasdaq Helsinki. 17,000 employees in 100% nationalities and around 50 countries. And our sales in 2023 were around 5.4 billion euros, out of which around 1.4 billion euros were of Planet Positive sales. Of course, you can find more information from metso.com.
Yeah, thank you, Hasmit, for that. In your introduction, you briefly mentioned AI task force. So maybe you could kind of specify what does that mean exactly at Metso, and what are the objectives of the task force?
Yeah, so last year, I think there was a significant interest in AI and specifically generative AI, and there was widespread usage through a lot of publicly available tools. And as a result, I think there was an anticipation from the business community as well that how could these be applied to the business world and professional routines. But at the same time, I think we all were also looking at the news that there were a lot of challenges concerning data privacy and security. So the AI task force was basically established to navigate through this surge of AI by evaluating it both as an opportunity and as a risk. So kind of looking at both these facets equally. And this also meant that we have to make sure that Metso would leverage AI in a responsible and balanced way. So the Metso AI task force had few goals. I think some of them were around like how do we raise AI awareness generally in the company, how we develop educational resources when it comes to AI, and also we were reviewing the new AI features that were popping up, as you could see in a lot of these enterprise platforms. I mean, co-pilots, for example, that are now coming up. It's becoming a standard now across these enterprise environments. So we were looking at those as well. But anyway, as you know that a lot of companies don't have the data or the data that GenAI requires. Usually in these systems, they are sitting in some data repositories like in SharePoints, for example. So to harness GenAI within this context, we kind of went with some bespoke or custom solutions, basically. And for that, we also turned to our primary cloud service provider for the AI services that could run these solutions. And I think the main reason here was that, with the pre-existing cloud deployments that we had on our cloud environments, I think it just provided a compelling argument. So these were kind of the main things that we were looking at from the AI task force perspective.
Yeah, sure. You mentioned custom solutions, so I'm thinking, where did you kind of apply these custom solutions? Could you tell more about that?
Yeah, so I think these solutions were mainly set up focusing in areas related to customer service and employee self-service. And if you look at across the industry, I think these are some of the low-hanging fruits that a lot of companies are looking at as well, because they have their data in more document format. And I think we were also kind of looking at the same, and I think they are medium complexity kind of solutions, and they provide a good return on investment. And I think they're also a good first step for companies to step into utilizing generative AI with their own data.
Yeah. So maybe we kind of start to move more towards the technology. So what was the different technology-wise in these tailored solutions?
Yeah, so I think with ChatGPT and GenAI, as you would know, last year, I think it became first famous for writing poetry, but that's not what we were looking for. We were not looking for creativity. We were looking at accuracy when it comes to working with enterprise data. So we didn't want, the solution to just answer something. As you know, that these solutions, out of the box have been very verbose, and that's where we kind of built a custom solution using the RAG approach, which is retrieval augmented generation. And what that does is it forces the solution to focus on the relevant context when answering these questions and not be too creative. And that, of course, reduces hallucination, I would say, which has become a very famous word in the last year. So I think all custom solutions that we have built and worked with have used RAG behind the scenes.
Yeah, that is definitely the case. And now that you mentioned retrieval augmented generation specifically, I think it could be worthwhile to spend a moment to talk about what it is exactly and kind of how does it differ from the basic solutions like ChatGPT. I know that the technical audience is familiar with the concept, but just in case to get everyone on the same page. So like I said, I guess most of us are familiar with ChatGPT or similar type of external solution providers already solutions. So basically, I guess the main limitation when it comes to this kind of solution is that they are limited to the training data that they have been trained with. So basically, usually in the enterprise context, you want to kind of find out something company specific. You want to access some kind of knowledge repository within your company, and of course, like these kind of solutions do not have access to that kind of data as they have been trained with only the public data. And if the users try to use this kind of solutions for company purposes, if you will, that kind of might cause the hallucinations, as you said already earlier.
Yeah, so I think, well, we could train or fine-tune an LLM with our own data, but I think for most organizations, I think it's an overkill.
Yes.
Or at least it's not the starting point, I would say. And I think for us, I see it in two ways. So for us, the focus is as a company that we own and generate this data, and that's what we have control over. But when it comes to technology like GenAI or AI, I don't think we have too much control over it because it's just moving too fast. And that's where I come back to, harnessing the power of the cloud. So the big cloud players are basically making this technology available to us. They're taking care of a lot of the things behind the scenes. So I would rather focus more on the data rather than the models or the technology in general, especially in these early days. But coming back, I think this is where RAG comes in. As you said, I think it enables you to kind of make this company data available for LLMs to question answering without this costly training process. It's a great start, especially if you have a good cloud provider. And then I think when you keep all these the parts of these solutions under your control, you can do this in a very secure way without running into security or data privacy issues.
Yeah, very good points. Okay, so maybe let's start building a simplified picture of the kind of the needed workflow to make this kind of solution work end to end. So speaking of which, I think like one of the most important, if not the most important one is in my opinion, the data extraction or the ingestion. So basically, how do you make this internal data source available for the retrieval part? So it includes basically, as you know very well, the actual ingestion or extraction of the data, then chunking, embedding it, and building this data into the actual search index and with possibly relevant metadata as well. But I think like in many conversations, this part gets overlooked when we are discussing RAG. So what do you think about this, Hasmit?
Well, data extraction, I think it's super important. So when we first started, I think it was, well, I would say things are getting easier now. But back when we started, the documents had different complex layouts. Not each document was same, and we're looking at these custom solutions. And some documents had tables, and those tables had different layouts. Some documents had one column layout, some had two column layout. So early on, we tried various open source libraries to try to ingest these documents to try to create these indexes. But I think the variation in the document layout was kind of throwing us off a little bit.
Yeah.
But as I said, when I said things are getting easier to process now again, if we go back to the cloud, we have seen that things have evolved very quickly. So there are these prepackaged services that you could use. I mean, AWS has it, Microsoft Azure has it. So for example, document intelligence in Azure. So that really does the heavy lifting for you when it comes to the data extraction. But again, when you use these services, there's a cost associated with it. So I would highly recommend that you do a little bit of a homework before you try to use this to kind of give an idea that when you scale up your solution, what will be the actual cost for using these services. So I think that's a very important aspect of it as well. It does make things easier, but you have to balance the cost versus the quality.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess it's good to take into account also the maintenance. If you use open source libraries compared to like off the shelf, that's something that kind of an established provider provides. I think there's always a trade-off. But I totally agree what you said. So basically, I guess you could say that the classic garbage in, garbage out still very much applies to this kind of RAG applications as well. And I think like to simplify it even more, I guess like mistakes made in the data extraction. If the table data is extracted incorrectly in the first phase, then it's impossible for the model to answer the user question correctly in the first place. But okay, moving forward with the workflow, so then we have the retrieval or the shared spot. So basically we try to retrieve from the data, whether it's vector database or database in general, we try to retrieve the relevant data for the user question. So any learnings or insights?
Yeah, I think one key observation is that there's an assumption that we want to drive everything with a semantic search,
Yeah.
So like a dog and a puppy is the same thing, but it may not be needed in all the cases. Yeah. So I think in many cases, or in some cases, the basic keyword search or the classic lexical search works quite well. Or then you can use a hybrid search where you combine semantic and lexical search to kind of do the searching. I think we have a couple of instances where we got better results just using a basic keyword or lexical search. And I think, for example, if you're searching for something that has a very fixed code, then a basic keyword search would work much better. So that's what we learned, early observation as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. And I think keyword search should act as the baseline in the first place. And I guess, like you said, in some cases, it's enough alone to provide you good enough results. Okay, so far we've discussed the data extraction and then also some comments related to the retrieval part. So maybe we can transition into the answer generation part. So anything you want to?
Yeah, I think when it comes to these solutions where you're working with enterprise data, accuracy is the first thing. So I think the basic 101 about the answer generation is that it should always have a link to the source. But I think that was an early discussion. But now what we're looking at is, for example, do we really need to run the whole chain to kind of fetch the answer, because what if your solution has a feature where, the users have been marking or giving feedback to the answers that they have been getting? So if there's a high quality answer available for a question, frequently asked question, I would just cache it, instead of trying to run it through the LLM again. So again, that's one part of it. The other part would be that you could optimize this in a way. So do you always need the most fancy LLM to generate the answer? You could use a much cheaper and a more optimized model as well. I think these are some of the things that are becoming more relevant, but I believe they may not be the first steps to look at. These become more relevant when you scale up the solutions.
Yeah, definitely. I think one very important concept that is relevant for both retrieval and the answer generation is how you evaluate how well they are actually working. So as we've already discussed, and you can see from the diagram for the audience as well, that there are many technological choices to be made when you want to optimize this kind of solution and the performance. So it's very important kind of how do you evaluate it. So basically in the search part, you have the embeddings, you have the chunking strategy, retrieval methods, as you mentioned already. And then for the answer generation, there's system prompts and LLM selections and a lot of things to be decided. So, but how do you exactly evaluate? I think it's a complex topic that we don't have time to dig into very deeply, but I think you should start from the basics in a way. So just building a data set according what kind of questions are the users asking. So sample questions, and then you have a ground truth answers to those specific questions, as well as the source information. So what data needs to be retrieved in order for the LLM to be able to answer that particular question. So, and then in addition to that, of course, you need some kind of systemic way of running tests against that test data set. So basically seeing what kind of LLM or retrieval strategy works the best with different questions. And I think like optimizing only the retrieval part can make wonders.
Yeah, so I think you raised very good points there. And I think when you understand I think the main thing is that you need to understand what the user wants. I know it may sound cliched, but that's really the base of all of it. When you know that, it becomes easier to design these solutions. But I think some needs you may not know, and you only see them as you see the users using this system. So for example, you might need some kind of observability.
Yeah.
Observability, that's the word.
That's the word.
Tooling, like logging of what the users are talking about. And I think then analyzing this data might be something that could give a lot of insights as well, like how the users are using the system.
Indeed. One interesting topic that we haven't yet talked about, we don't have much time left, but basically data privacy, identity management. So this is a very important part of the solution. If you have different kinds of users that should have different types of access to the documentation or the data. So any comments there?
Yeah. To me, it's very straightforward. You manage the accesses where your data is. Don't do it in these solutions. So if you have a SharePoint or if you have a document repository, manage the access there. I think that's principle number one. I think that follows as the main thing I would say when it comes to this topic.
Yeah, I agree. But starting to wrap up, so far you've shared a lot of insights, basically our learnings from the past 1.5 years of building or implementing this kind of generative AI solutions. But I'm thinking like, what's next? So in terms of RAG or AI or GenAI in general?
Yeah, I think working with GenAI is fun, but that's not what you're doing it for only. So I think we have to look beyond the hype and kind of see what the value we get out of it. So now we're kind of monitoring and kind of looking at the return of investment, what we get out of these solutions. And then I think if we can look beyond the hype and can get real value, then we try to also ingest more data sources and kind of make this more part of the value chain, kind of not only answering questions, but perhaps also doing some tasks. So that would mainly be the next steps. And I think then also optimizing the solution from a cost and a performance perspective would also be something that we would be now looking at.
Yeah, I agree. Now I can see also in the market that basically the hype is starting to go down and companies have more realistic expectations and focus on the value, like you said. So I think that's a really nice way to end the discussion. Thank you, Hasmeet, for sharing the learnings with us today. And thank you for the audience for joining us. And feel free to, for example, reach out via LinkedIn if you have questions or want to discuss this topic further. But I guess it's time to say goodbye then. So bye-bye.